Got some new parts. Welcome back, everyone. So this video is going to be obviously about the 69 Camaro, and we are moving on to transmission drivetrain area. As you can see, I also got the motor out, so we can do the last couple things to this, including installing the clutch. You also see that we got right to work on the 6-speed TR6060 transmission. We just cleaned it up. You know, we got a little work to do to this thing, which we'll get into later in the video, but it's always good to start, or I always like to start with a clean slate. You don't want to be working with, greasy stuff. So yeah, we have a brand new LS7 clutch and flywheel and setup and all the related parts that go with that. ARP flywheel bolts in this box. There's a new throwout bearing, aka slave cylinder on these, if you guys are familiar with these GM hydraulic clutches. A couple other parts here and there. Also, while we're at it, basically the only seal left in this motor that's original that we didn't touch in one of the previous videos is this seal right here on the rear cover and the rear main seal. So we're going to do those before we put the clutch on, and then we can move into some other stuff. Kind of like the last video, there's a bunch of little other nitpicky stuff that we can get to on the list in the meantime, but for now, let's focus on getting this clutch on, then we'll get to that TR6060 6-speed. I'll let you guys know what the plan is for that, but for right now, let's start with this seal. Flywheel, clutch, new hardware, should be good to go. And guys, don't sleep on Rock Auto. Hopefully some of you guys out there are using them for your OEM parts, but if you're looking for OEM parts like gaskets or seals or anything that the car would have come with from the factory for any make or model, man, it's hard to beat their prices. This is a genuine LS7 clutch kit. What is it, LUK or whatever? I don't know. Yeah, LUK right here is the original manufacturer for the GM LS7 clutch. So pressure plate, clutch disc, you got your slave cylinder / throwout bearing right here, alignment tool, and a new pilot bearing. I think this was like 270 bucks. And also a new flywheel. You don't always have to do new flywheel, but for me, it's one of those things while you're in there for 100 bucks, brand new flywheel. So all this, 370 or 380 bucks. On eBay, even on eBay, which is usually the cheapest out of anything, was over 500. So don't sleep on Rock Auto. You get good prices, fast shipping. Plus, you get a free magnet you can stick on your metal cabinet. So yeah, let's get going on this seal and pilot bearing. And this pilot bearing, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but this thing sounds like a baby's rattle. This thing is toast. I'm surprised this wasn't making noise. The bearing in here is totally shot, and unless I'm looking at this wrong, it looks like it's almost completely out. Holy crap, I didn't even notice that before. That pilot bearing is supposed to be flush with the crank there, and it is completely out. But yeah, pilot bearing sounds like crap, so we're obviously going to do that. You should do that every time you do a clutch. I've always used the bread trick, which if you guys are not familiar with it, you just basically force a bunch of bread from your kitchen in here and use a socket and just hammer on it until the pressure forces the bearing out. But I've done some further reading since then, and apparently there's a freeze plug or something on the other side that you can actually push through and then into the oil pan, which you don't want to do. So I finally went and spent some money, got one of these slide hammer pullers, which you can use hopefully to get in here, pull this out. It's a Harbor Freight job, so I'm sure it'll break the first time I use it, but we'll give that a shot. So we'll get this pilot bearing out, get the new one in, get this seal out, or get this gasket out, replace the seal, which you have to use a special alignment tool, which I also have from the other times I've worked on LS motors, and then we can get the flywheel bolted up. So yeah, let's get to work. Get this shit up. Literally 1/2 of a pull here. She's out. So can't really say how well this Harbor Freight tool works, but on this case it did. So shout out Harbor Freight. Let's do that seal. just like that, we got the LS7 clutch installed. Behind it, we did the rear cover gasket here, as well as a rear main seal, using my rear main seal alignment tool. New flywheel ARP bolts, torqued to, what was it, 85 foot-pounds, I believe. And then the old clutch bolts with some Loctite, torqued to 52 foot-pounds or 54 foot-pounds. I used my old input shaft for my Corvette, so much better alignment tool than the plastic ones they give you. And this thing's good to go. Brand new L7 clutch, should be plenty stout for you know, a cam setup and bolt-on setup in an LS3. These are known to be good to 550, sometimes up to 600 plus horsepower to the tire, you know, depending on how you drive it. So good budget clutch for you know, a lot of LS guys. That'll be perfect for what we're doing. Moving on. You guys notice I cleaned off my workbench over here and moved up an old workbench from the basement because we have got some transmission work to do to the TR6060. I briefly got into this in a previous video, but long story short, we are going to attempt to convert this to a T56 Magnum. A couple reasons why. Biggest one is this right here. TR6060 uses this weird like 3-bolt coupling. You Corvette guys will be familiar with these bushings. These are kind of like your torque tube bushings. Connects up there. Then you've got a 2-piece drive shaft that comes off here. That's how all the TR6060s are. Those drive shafts are expensive, and obviously we need to have a custom one built for us, just so we can get back to our GM rear end over there. And then if we mini tub and do a 9-inch, which might change those dimensions some, then we'd have to get another expensive custom drive shaft. So we'd like to get rid of this. Other thing being, the TR6060s use this remote shifter. So your shift mechanism or linkage is right there. Shifter's mounted way back here. It uses a push rod basically between those two, which can make mounting these kind of difficult as well. And the final thing here is the transmission mount. This mount does not really play well with the Holley mount setup that I have, or the Holley crossmember that I have. It's designed for a T56, not a TR6060. So all that being considered, especially the custom drive shaft thing, I started looking at options, and apparently some people have done it, and there used to be kits available, basically a T56 conversion kit. And what that entails is, unfortunately, complete disassembly of the transmission. You basically need to take the T56 Magnum main shaft, which I got here, Tremec part number right there, and swap everything from the TR6060 main shaft over to the T56 Magnum main shaft, a couple other additional components. But as far as I've read, everything pretty much swaps right over. So like I said, basically the tail housing has to come off. Actually, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. One component that's missing here that I don't have yet, it's going to be here tomorrow, is the new tail housing, T56 Magnum tail housing, which will put the shifter right here where it would be on most T56s, and also gets us the right mount we need. So once we have that, we can remove the tail housing, remove the main shaft, basically swap everything over to the T56 main shaft, and then put it all back together. Easy, right? I've never worked internally on a transmission other than back in my Cobra days there. I did, you know, an input shaft, 26 spline input shaft, and shim that and check the tolerance, and that wasn't too bad. So I think we got all the tools we need. Like I said, my plan is to, as most people do, take every gear off, lay it out on the table in the exact order it came off, and then when it comes time to reassemble, we'll do so. I'm probably going to end up time-lapsing you guys on this. This might take a couple days, maybe a week. I'm not sure. I'm going to take my time. Going to try and use the GoPro footage to go back if I ever need to look at anything, but hopefully next time I see you guys, we have done this complete T56 conversion here. So yeah, wish me luck. I'll bring you guys along for as much as I can. See you on the other side. Well, hope we can put all this back together. So we got some updates for you guys. Just a quick update. The entire main shaft is disassembled. As you can see, the bell housing / front case here, which are integrated on the TR6060s. I left as much on there as I could, like the shift rails and forks and whatnot. Here's the main case. Here is some new parts we got. This is the T56 Magnum tail housing and a shifter I picked up for a good deal, brand new takeoff. So you guys are probably familiar with how that looks. Here's the old TR6060 housing. You can see how much shorter it is. And here's all the guts. So I, tried to be as organized as I could, keep the main shaft separated from the counter shaft. Everything's taken off and put in the exact orientation it was taken off of. So hopefully it goes back the exact same way. Combination of 3-jaw pullers, bearing separators, my press down in the basement. I actually got a pretty gnarly cut on my pinky from trying to grab one of these gears as the shaft was falling through the press. So too graphic for YouTube, but I can assure you it's under there. But here's the main purpose for all this, is swapping the main shaft. So this is the T56 Magnum main shaft, which has your standard 1350 U-joint output here. And here's the TR6060 one. You can see it's not only shorter because of the shorter tail housing, but this is where your 3 bolts yoke would slip on, just like that. So we're doing away with that. And you can see they're pretty much identical right up until right about here, where there's a slightly different speedo gear, which we got even though we're not using it because we're using GPS speed. But basically the idea is now swap all this back onto this guy in the same order. The only casualty was the last bearing we pressed off on this side, which is pretty common for people that do this. You can't get your press under this lip, so you end up having to break the cage and then get your press under this lip right here and pop it off. This is a standard Timken bearing though, so we'll order a new one. No big deal. But yeah, so got to get everything back onto this thing, put it all back together, and hope that it works. So I'm going to get that bearing on order, and we'll get back to putting this transmission back together and hopefully see you guys when we got a completed transmission ready to go. So wish me luck. I don't know how I did it, but somehow we've got a complete transmission on the table, on one table, and no spare parts on the other table. So I think we did it. So there you have it, guys. Our T56 Magnum conversion from your TR6060. Their internals are basically all the same other than the main shaft, as you saw. So the whole point of all this was strip everything off the main shaft and then install all those gears and synchronizers and idlers and all that back on in the same order to the T56 Magnum main shaft, which is longer and stronger to make it up this T56 Magnum tail housing, which is about 3 or 4 inches longer than your standard TR6060 one. New T56 Magnum shift rail. We're waiting for this RTV to cure up a little bit before we torque these bolts to spec. And then I'll be putting on our T56 Magnum shifter. So your standard T56 uses 4 bolts. This one uses 6. So this will bolt up right here. But again, I'm waiting for this to cure up before we torque it. Got a new tail housing seal here, so we'll pop that on when when that's done drying. We are pretty much done. No spare parts on the workbench, always a good sign. Transmission shifts, or transmission turns nice and smooth. Seems to go into every gear, no problems. All sealed up, ready to roll. So a couple little last things I want to do. This is called the mid shift area. So this is where the old shifter linkage came in right here. You can see it's kind of pushed back via this linkage on the T56 Magnum. So that was this plate right here. That used to go right there. We don't need this anymore since we're shifting back here. So using my trusty Bud Light cardboard, I traced out a template to make us a cover because I couldn't find one online, and even if I could, you know, I've got the materials and tools to make it myself. All it's doing is covering that hole. So got that traced out on some scrap steel here. So we'll cut that up, get it painted, put it on. And I'm also going to paint this entire case once we get it all sealed up. Basically went through this whole thing. The internals on this thing look brand new. So I'm declaring it that we can give her a rebuilt paint job on the outside. We'll spray it with some fresh silver. We can't have a brand new looking engine, brand new looking car in a, you know, still slightly dirty transmission. So let's button this thing up, prep it for paint, spray it in. We'll call this transmission job done. finished the transmission. So that is our TR6060 to T56 Magnum tail housing and main shaft swap. We went through basically the whole thing. All the synchros, gears, internals look absolutely perfect on this thing. Resealed it, gave it a fresh coat of paint, checked all the tolerances, made this mid-shift plate cover, new Magnum shifter, new seal on the end here. Everything looks awesome. The transmission seems like it goes into every gear, butter smooth. Everything turns freely. Couldn't be happier with how this came out. Pretty daunting project, to be honest with you. This is something I was kind of nervous about as far as all the projects we're doing to this 69. This is the one I was kind of most worried about. Never done internal transmission work, but really taking your time on something like this helps. If something's not going together right, you know, take a step back. Are you kidding me right now? Just take your time. If you're attempting something like this, laying everything out on the workbench helps a ton. Just goes right back in the same order it came out. Also, take a bunch of pictures. You know, the hardest part about putting this back together, I think, was getting the shift forks interlocked in the correct mechanism or correct way. It was like a puzzle. Took me almost 2 hours to figure that out one night. And if I had to do it again right now, I could do it in 5 to 10 minutes, maybe less. So the learning curve is steep. This took a long time, but again, now if I have to do it again, I kind of know what I'm doing. It was cool to see how the internals of this thing work. If I have a problem with the transmission in the Corvette, it's basically this section is the same, exactly the same TR6060. So glad I did it, not a lot of cost involved. And now I know that my Holley transmission mount is going to bolt right up to this standard T56 housing. We can use a standard drive shaft right out the back here, and should be good to go. So right here, right in here, this is our complete drivetrain for our 69 Camaro. 100% ready to go. LS3 ready to roll. TR6060 ready to roll. So yeah, that's gonna be the next video. We'll slap these two together, get them in the car, and you know, we're getting close, kind of. But hope to see you guys then. See you next time.